Take a slow breath and feel the quiet settle. Winter life of medieval peasants. In the deep heart of winter, long before electric lights or the hum of heaters, there lived the quiet souls of medieval peasants. Their homes were made of timber and earth, their boots of wool and leather, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Yet inside their small wooden houses, time passed softly, like snow falling silently in the forest. Their life, though simple, was a song of survival sung in harmony with the natural world. Winter was long and steady. Days began slowly, with the crackle of a fire gently waking the darkness. A thin beam of pale sunlight would slip in through the small window, made not of glass, but of stretched, oiled parchment. The warmth of the hearth did not chase away the cold entirely, but it wrapped itself around the family like a soft blanket. Every movement was mindful, every sound quiet. Even the footsteps across the earthen floor seemed to whisper. The walls were thick logs filled with moss and clay, sealing out the frost. The roof was layered with roots and branches, covered in earth where soft green grass would grow again when spring arrived. But in winter, snow blanketed everything in white. Outside there was only stillness. Inside there was steady breath. A pot of stew simmered slowly over the fire. A loaf of coarse bread sat on the wooden table. Steam curled gently upward as the fire cracked and popped beneath the iron pot. The family slept together on a raised bed near the ceiling where warm air gathered. Side by side they lay under woolen blankets, their breath forming clouds in the chilly night. The darkness was soft, familiar. In the distance, wind whispered through the trees. The fire hummed a low song, and sleep was easy. No rush, no burden, just the comfort of warmth, wood, and silence. They did not venture out often unless to gather firewood or brush snow from the roof. The fields lay resting under layers of frost and ice. Animals were sheltered in barns of straw and timber. Life was slower, softer, with no loud machines or bright screens. Every sound mattered: the rustle of hay, the knock of a wooden door in the wind, the faint bleat of a lone sheep as snowflakes drifted down like stars. In the evenings, the family gathered close, hands wrapped around warm cups of broth. Stories were told in low voices, passed from one generation to the next, tales of winter spirits and whispered legends about the forest. The children listened half asleep, eyes heavy, drifting off to dreams by the flickering glow of the hearth. They lived close to the land and close to each other. Through cold days and frozen nights, their bond held strong like the beams of their home. Winter was not an enemy to fight, but a season to accept, to flow through peacefully as water does around stone. Wrapped in wool, fed on roots, broth, and bread, they waited together for the thaw, for spring, for green to find its way back. And in this quiet simplicity, something beautiful existed. A rhythm, a stillness, a gentle reminder that even in the coldest times, warmth comes if we stay close, breathe softly, and let the world around us rest. When we look back at medieval history, we often imagine grand castles, knights in shining armor, or towering cathedrals built stone by stone. But there was another world too, one much quieter, simpler, and deeper in its connection to nature. A world made of wooden beams, crackling fires, woolen blankets, and the hush of fresh snowfall. The world of the medieval peasant. Winter especially told a different story for these humble people. Unlike kings or merchants who lived behind stone walls, Peasants lived close to the ground. Their lives followed the pulse of the seasons. In summer, they worked the soil, sowed seeds, and tended harvests. But in winter, they turned inward. There was peace in this stillness, a chance to mend tools, share meals, and sleep deeply to the lullaby of the wind. The rhythm of their winter days was slow yet full. They chopped wood, carried water, and loved one another under heavy skies. They tended to precious warmth, both in their fires and in their hearts. Their homes might have been small, but they radiated a light that not even the fiercest frost could dim. And so the story of winter life among medieval peasants is a gentle one, a story of resilience wrapped in simplicity, warmth woven into wood and wool, a perfect tale to soften the mind and cradle the heart. Winter life of medieval peasants. Winter comes gently in the way ancient time always does, slowly, softly, without urgency or noise. In medieval Europe, the peasants did not meet it with fear or frenzy. They prepared in silence, the way their parents and grandparents had. There were no modern heaters or humming metal stoves. No refrigerators filled with stockpiled food. There was only tradition, patience, and the old rhythm of the land. Each house stood like a quiet haven against the coming cold. Wood stacked wall by wall, roofs layered with grass and straw, a small fire pit nestled at the heart of every home. Around the village, the fields had folded into sleep, and the forests had grown still. The soft hush of winter settled everywhere. It felt like the world itself had curled into a blanket and begun to dream. In those days, peasants knew the language of winter. They spoke it through their hands, gathering wood, drying herbs, storing roots and grain in the cellar below. A thin mist often hung in the morning, drifting past their faces as they stepped out of their cottages wrapped in woolen hoods. The world was pale, like the breath of an old song. No one hurried. No one wasted breath. They worked in rhythm with the cold, not against it. Winter was not an enemy. It was simply another guest to be hosted, with respect, with quiet, with care. Inside their homes, the world was smaller, warmer, wrapped in the scent of baked bread and simmered stew. The fire in the center burned low and steady. The house was made of timber packed with clay and moss to keep out the cold. The walls talked softly when night winds swept past. Above them, the roof held layers of earth where grass once grew and where snow now lay gently, insulating, watching, warming. Nights came early as they always did in winter. Candles flickered gently, lighting the corners in golden breath. From the raised platform near the ceiling where they slept, peasants could gaze down at the fire below like watching a small sun nestled in their home. Families slept close, parents, children, even small animals sometimes, all breathing warmth into one another. The dark did not frighten them. It simply covered the world in a deeper layer of rest. Outside, the sky was a wide silver bowl. Sometimes snow fell softly all night, like a quiet thought drifting down from the heavens. When morning came, the world was dressed in white, quiet and untouched. The sound of a wooden door opening would be the first break in the stillness, followed by the steady crunch of boots on snow. A peasant might step outside to fetch wood. They would breathe deeply, and their breath would rise into the cold air, like fog blooming. Throughout the long, muted days, time didn't feel like something to chase. It felt like a companion that walked slowly beside them. Winter was long, yes, but it was steady. It was something that had always been and would always be. Inside, children played with straw dolls and small carved toys. The older ones helped grind grain on stone mills, breaking the silence with the slow turning sound. Women wove woolen cloth and mended old garments by firelight, humming songs with no words at all. Men crafted tools, sharpened blades, and prepared wooden handles from hard timber cut months before. Everyone worked with the same calm hands, the same belief that all things had their season. In the evening, after a day of still movement, families would gather near the hearth. A pot of thick vegetable soup might bubble, seasoned with dried herbs. A loaf of barley bread baked earlier that week was sliced and dipped. Outside, the wind echoed softly against the walls. Inside, the fire popped and hissed like a gentle storyteller. Sometimes, during these nights, stories truly were told, passed down through generations. Not stories of war or conquest, but simple tales of the forest, of the aunts and uncles who taught them where wood grows straightest, where snow first melts, where wolves hide during the cold. Children would chew slowly, eyes heavy but open, listening intently. When they slept, they dreamed gently as the fire burned low, steady, warm. As winter deepened, the peasants sometimes retreated into dugout homes, half buried into the ground where the earth itself helped hold warmth. Inside these homes, the feeling was like being hugged by the land. The earth walls were thick and round, the ceiling low, lined with bundles of straw, the ground beneath soft and slightly warm. These houses were less visible under the snow, but inside they were full of breath and heat and gentle light. Even as frost grew on windows and ice hardened on the well, the peasants remained together. In this togetherness, winter seemed less cold. Families shared food and fire. If one home ran out of wood, another would carry logs across the snow. If a child fell ill, a neighbor would walk slowly across frozen ground to bring warm broth. There was no need to hurry. Everything felt like it could wait, like time itself was quieter in winter. Days melted gently into nights. The fire became a heartbeat. The wind outside like a long exhale. There was a harmony between the people and the world around them. Winter simply held them all together under one calm breath. And when at last the snow began to melt, when the first drops of melted water began to drip from the roofs, they knew spring was coming. Not because anyone said so, but because they heard it in the earth. And winter, like all things, bowed and made way for light, softly, naturally, as every season of life does. The quiet architecture of warmth. Homes in the medieval countryside were simple, quiet places. In the middle of winter, they stood like warm lanterns against the muted snow. The houses did not reach upward with towers or stone arches. Instead, they rested close to the ground, forming low wooden shapes surrounded by wind and frost. Inside, there was only one room for most families, a single room with thick walls made from logs, a packed earth floor, flat and dry beneath bare feet or woolen socks. A few wooden tools leaned against one wall, a small table and stool near another. But right in the center of it all was the fire. The fireplace stood not as decoration or luxury, but as the heart of the home, the quiet flame that made the cold outside seem unimportant. It did not burn wildly, it did not burst with sparks and wild dancing flames. Instead, it burned with a steady amber glow, releasing soft warmth into the air. The peasants would tend the fire carefully, adding only as much wood as needed. They understood the winter, and they worked with it gently. The fire was like their breath, slow, steady, continuous. Above the earth floor, a wooden loft was built. This loft was where the family slept, near the ceiling where rising heat gathered. It was the warmest part of the room. A ladder led up to it, each step familiar, worn smooth by hands and feet. At night, the family would climb up the ladder one by one, bringing with them woolen blankets and straw-stuffed pillows. The air up there was soft, full of warm breath and dreams. The flickering glow from below cast gentle shadows upward. A child on the loft could look down and see the coals glowing like calm little stars. They did not need much. Their home was not filled with things but with warmth and stillness. The roof above was low. It curved like the shape of a held breath. Sometimes frost formed on the inside of the walls in the coldest months. But the fire never went out completely. It was tended always, day and night, a light in the dark. Imagine for a moment a quiet evening. Outside snow falls softly onto thatch and earth. The wind sighs but does not roar. Inside, the smell of soup lingers. A pot sits over the fire, simmering slowly. Root vegetables, dried herbs, water, a pinch of salt. Nothing more, but it is enough to satisfy hunger and soften the chill. A wooden spoon rests beside the pot. The table holds only one bowl, passed from hand to hand. Warm broth, shared in silence. Each sound is soft, the creak of wood beneath a shifting foot, the rustle of straw when someone sits, the low hum of someone humming a tune without words. Inside this one room there is no hurry. Time walks slowly. It is never loud here. Winters were long in medieval Europe, but the peasants knew how to live through them in peace. They built their homes not to fight the cold, but to welcome warmth. The walls were thick, and any gaps were stuffed with clay, moss, wool, or straw. Every small crack was checked. Sometimes smoke was let out inside the room to track where it escaped through walls. Then those places were packed and sealed. It was a ritual, a quiet way of preparing the world around them so the cold would stay outside. The windows were small, covered in parchment or animal skin. They did not let much light in, just enough. The sunlight that filtered through was gentle, thin, silvery. It stretched across the room in narrow beams, lighting dust in slow motion. In winter afternoons, the family would sit near these windows, mending clothes or weaving baskets. Their hands moved in slow rhythm like snowflakes drifting in the wind. Doors were built low, thick, and sturdy to keep the cold air out. Sometimes there were two doors, one leading to a small enclosed space and another leading outside. This helped keep wind and frost from rushing in whenever the door opened. It felt like stepping into a small wooden cave, calm and warm, a shelter from winter's breath. When night came, the family retreated to their sleeping loft. Parents whispered softly to their children. Children whispered back. The air was filled with warmth and unspoken comfort. Above them, the roof held its weight silently. Beneath them, the fire dimmed, glowing like memory. Outside, the world slept too, blanketed in snow. Sometimes they would hear wolves in the distance, but the wolves kept their distance. The unseen circle of firelight, smoke, and human breath was enough to make them stay away. So the family slept without fear, wrapped in wool, held by the soft sigh of winter passing slow. There were no beds of feathers, no soft silk covers, yet the warmth of shared breath and bodies created something richer than luxury, the comfort of belonging. When dawn came, the frost on the windows melted slightly from the fire's warmth below. A few coals glowed still. Someone would rise, pull on shoes, stir the embers, blow softly, add wood. The flame would grow again. The glow would pulse out. The home would wake up quietly, like a soft song. Such was the home, not grand, not vast, just one room, one fire, one family. But everything that mattered was inside it, a shelter, a gentle flame, breath that rose into the dark and returned as warmth. In a world of cold winds and deep frost, this was enough, more than enough. It was a different kind of richness. It was peace. Gentle winter living, a story of choosing where to build. They say that in every age there is a wisdom passed down quietly, like a stream flowing through generations. In the medieval countryside, this wisdom was not written in books or etched into stone monuments. It was living knowledge, breathed into the earth, shared through careful words and long observation. And nowhere was that wisdom more beautifully expressed than in the way medieval peasants chose where to build their homes for the winter. It began not with tools or materials, but with eyes and silence. The land spoke in its own gentle language, and the people listened. They watched how the sun rose and fell across the hills. They spent seasons learning how the wind moved, how the snow settled, where water gathered and froze long into spring. To build a home was not merely to place timber on earth. It was to find the quiet truth of where warmth lived naturally and where cold would not easily settle. So they chose places on gentle slopes facing the south, a place where sunlight arrived early and lingered as long as it could before fading into night. On these slopes, even in winter, the sun still had a kind embrace. They avoided valleys where bitter air pooled and frost lasted longest. They avoided steep hillsides where the wind howled and carried snow like endless white waves. Instead, they found that perfect middle ground, softly elevated, softly open, softly warm. You can imagine it if you close your eyes. A hill not too high, dressed in faded grass and scattered stones, a few bare trees bending peacefully in the wind. On this land, someone would tap the ground gently with one hand, feel the firmness, smell the soil. It was good earth, dry, strong, willing to hold walls and roof. Days passed gently. Decisions were not rushed. For a house, once placed, would hold not just human bodies, but human dreams. A place to sleep, a place to become warm again, after gathering wood, after tending animals in snow, a place for soup to simmer and for whispers to soften the low hum of night. So the location was not chosen by chance. It was chosen with care. And when they built, they faced the opening toward the light, south. This was where windows, small and humble, would catch the sweetest warmth even in winter's pale sun. The other walls, those facing north and west, were thick, strong, meant to hold back the frost-laden wind. Sometimes they planted shrubs or small fences on that side to help block the gusts, not to fight the wind, but to help the home nestle quietly in the landscape. Because winter is not just cold, winter is a season that asks us to be gentle, a season that teaches patience, and medieval peasants knew this in the beating of their hearts. So they built low, simple, and close to nature, not against it. If If you walked by these houses in the first snowfall, you might not see them right away. Their roofs, covered with straw or grass, might blend into the frosted earth. A thin trail of smoke rising was often the first sign of life, that silent sign of warmth. Inside, the home was small, but the space felt whole. It sat in the right place. The ground beneath was dry, never muddy. Dampness was the enemy in winter, so they chose earth that drained water easily. That is why the slight slope mattered. Any melting snow would slide away, leaving the house safe and dry. And in this dryness, the hearth fire could burn true. The wood would not rot. The walls would not mold. Some might think these small choices unimportant, but to the people of that time, these choices were sacred. Every decision made in harmony with the land was a promise, a quiet prayer that winter would pass without harm, that the family would endure, that the children might sleep warm, dreaming of spring and green fields yet to come. The house was not built in a hurry. Like the way snow falls, quietly and deeply, they worked step by steady step. Logs were brought from the forest, dragged slowly by oxen through the first snow. Moss was gathered to seal the walls, but only after days of drying carefully near the fire. Earth was lifted gently from the hillside, not in heaps, but in baskets, poured softly atop the roof to make soil beds for grass. That grass would not only hold the roof still, its roots would hold the heat like a soft blanket in winter. And the house became part of the hill, a part of the land, no higher than what was needed, no louder than the field mice running across the snow. In the silence of night, when the wind whispered, the house whispered back. When winter came, and the wind carried flakes and slow spirals down from the sky, these houses stood like gentle resting places. Travelers passing might not even see them from afar. They seemed tucked into the ground like stories wrapped in wool and snow. But step closer and you'd hear faint sounds, laughter, low-speaking voices, maybe the soft tap of someone preparing bread. These houses were alive with warmth, small worlds of breath and light, buried deep in the quiet of nature. And it was all because they were placed with care, because someone took time to watch how the sun lived its days. Someone traced the wind. Someone lay awake in autumn, listening to the calls of night animals, hearing which direction brought cold and which carried warmth. Even the smallest choice, like how high to raise the foundation, how far from a stream to settle, or how near to a woodland to shelter, all of it came back in winter as comfort, as safety, as life. There is a humble brilliance in this old way of building not just houses but peace. And as frost rose on the windows of those homes, the families inside could rest. They had chosen well. The house knew how to breathe. It did not tremble in the harsh wind. It did not flood. It did not groan with rot. It stood quiet, glowing from within. So let us admire them, not for grandeur or stone carvings or arches rising high, but for the simple, soft, wise ways in which they placed a roof and four walls upon the earth, for the way they chose a slope, faced the sun, watched the wind, and whispered, "Let this be our shelter." And it was. A silent craft, building warmth in winter. In the quiet breath of winter, the medieval peasants began their work, slow, steady, careful. winter was not simply a season to survive. It was a rhythm to move with, a soft song they had learned to hum across generations, for their homes to hold warmth, for their nights to be kind. Blood not icy in their veins, they needed more than fire. They needed walls that stood like gentle guardians between them and the cold. And so, they built. Thick wood was the first embrace of their shelter. Heavy logs cut from sturdy trees, their textures rough, their scent still thick with forest air, were set into place, one on top of another. These were placed not in haste, but with a calm precision, like arranging warm hands over a loved one's shoulders. Each log was a line in the poetry of survival. But no log, no matter how thick, could stand alone against the coldest winds. Between each were gaps, small spaces where harsh air might slip through if left untouched. They could not allow that. And so the second art of winter dwelling revealed itself, the art of sealing. The villagers gathered moss from riverbank stones in late autumn. They scooped up clay with bare hands, soft and cool, its weight grounding them. They collected wood shavings, old wool scraps, even sawdust left from splitting firewood. All of this combined became the warm mortar of their world. They pressed it gently, lovingly, between the wooden logs. It was a process done with quiet, repetitive movement. Press, smooth, press, smooth. The rhythm like the sound of a tanpura string, hum, hum, echoing lightly through their own slow breathing. There was nothing rushed. Winter was long. They had time. Sometimes children would help, tiny hands pushing moss into gaps, giggling when too much fell out. A mother would brush away stray pieces, adding another layer of clay with practiced fingers. In the dimming light of afternoon, the walls took shape, lined, sealed, strengthened by steady attention. These were not perfect walls, nothing was. Yet they held love. When their work neared completion, they would build a fire inside the house, even before it was fully finished. Not to warm up the space, winter still hadn't arrived, but to breathe smoke through the structure. Smoke was their secret ally, a wandering spirit that showed them the flaws of their work. It drifted slowly through the air. If it curled out through a tiny crack, they would know. Here, just here. Add a little more moss, a little more clay. It was almost like listening to where the house whispered, "I'm not ready there." The smoke would reveal these spots gently, never loudly, and the people would answer with tender care. More moss, more clay, nothing sharp, nothing hurried. The houses, once sealed, became warm and solid. Just as a warm blanket holds the body, so too these walls held warmth. The materials seemed humble. Moss, clay, wood shavings, but there was something sacred in their gathering. They came from earth and forest. They carried the soft memory of trees, soil, and stream, and giving them a new life as walls was like telling them, "You may rest here now. Help us hold the cold away." Nothing was wasted. Everything had purpose. The roof, too, needed warmth. Layers of timber beams, then thatch, then maybe turf, maybe straw, sometimes earth itself. A roof that carried life on its back. Sometimes grasses would grow there in spring, not beautiful, just natural. An extension of the world into the home. In winter, snow lay peacefully atop the roof, like a soft blanket of silence. Inside, the insulation had one more purpose. It cradled sound. Every whisper echoed just slightly. Every sigh seemed caught by the walls. A fire's crackle sounded deeper. Footsteps on wooden boards sounded gentler. the space became something warm in spirit, not just in temperature. The insulation wasn't about shutting the world out. It was about creating peace within. When the coldest nights arrived, when the moon shined pale over a land frozen still, the family inside their sealed wooden house could sit, share warm broth from one pot, and feel that something more than materials kept them safe. The walls sang with the warmth they held. No draft, no chill, just the soft exhale of winter wind outside and the heartbeat of fire inside. Neighbors would visit each other to help with sealing. If someone's house had a stubborn draft, others might carry over fresh moss or offer wool. It was a communal practice built on care, not competition. Each home built was like a verse in the survival song of the village. With every sealed wall, they knew the village would breathe easier together. Even when the season's cold reached its height, the insulation did not fail. Snow piled high, rivers froze, but inside, with walls layered inside and out, the rooms stayed warm enough for the people to live, eat, sleep, and dream. And when the nights grew quieter, when all outside seemed wrapped in white stillness, the people in those small insulated homes would lie close together under blankets, their hopes not tinged with fear, but with rest. Safe inside a shelter they built with gentle, earthly hands. Every wall whispered gratitude. Every insulated corner held the warmth of generations. A quiet shelter, the story of layered roofs. In the hush of winter, when snow gently blankets the earth and the air moves like a slow breath, medieval peasants rested under roofs built not just from wood and straw, but from wisdom, earth, and time. The quiet truth was this: to survive winter, their homes needed warmth. And to keep warmth inside, the roof mattered as much as the fire, perhaps even more. It was not a single layer of protection, but many, built softly, layer by layer, year after year, like the rings of a tree. The first layer began with bark, rough, curled, sturdy bark peeled from fallen trees or collected after careful cutting. Bark was nature's own shield, already shaped to resist rain and snow. It did not rot easily. It did not let water in. Laid down across thick beams, it became the silent skin of the roof, strong and yet soft in its purpose. When rain fell, it slid off. When frost grew, the bark kept still, holding its shape under white weight. But bark alone was not enough. Beneath it, water might find its way in, or chill might linger in the air. So came the second layer, straw or moss, gathered with patient hands. Straw glistened golden in summer sun, before being bundled with care to store away for the cold season. Moss grew quietly in the damp, dark places of the forest. Both could cradle warmth and hold it close. Both could breathe and dry if dampness crept in. So they formed a cushioned blanket beneath the bark. Peasants pressed straw into long layers, weaving it gently like hair across the bark boards. The smell of dried grass lingered in the air. The touch of moss was cool, like soft green velvet. Sometimes a child would help, their small hands pressing the moss deeper into place, and in those gentle acts, the house began to hum with life. The third layer was the most humble, yet the most beautiful. Earth, soil, grass, a layer of living ground brought up to the roof, poured and pressed like love into place. It was often a mixture of raked up dirt and cut turf, shallow mats of living grass with roots still tangled underneath. Placed upside down, the roots caught onto the straw and bark below, forming a mat that bound everything together. Over time, those roots reached out, gripping the wood and moss in silent strength. At first, all was brown and muddy, but then something magical happened. The earth on the roof continued to live. If the timing was right, if winter fell gently and snow melted in warm spells, small green shoots would rise in spring, a roof of grass, a rooftop meadow, a place where birds could land and insects could sleep beneath winter's cold. So the house blended into the land as if it was not a house built on earth, but a hill with a warm heart beneath. Snow rested on it like soft blankets. Rain trickled off in gentle rivulets. Wind flowed over it, unable to pry up tiles since there were none. Only earth, living and breathing and holding itself in place. The roof could last years, with only touch-ups needed each summer. Inside, the warmth stayed. The fire in the hearth breathed heat upward, and the layered roof held it, like cupped hands holding a flame. Even on the coldest nights, when the moon climbed white and silent into the sky, the roof never let the breath of winter slip inside. It cocooned the peasants in a gentle pocket of comfort. Sometimes frost formed a lace pattern on the ceiling beams, but the air below remained safe for sleep and soft laughter. Outside, the house seemed to disappear into the snowy landscape, natural and almost ancient looking. A stranger passing might not know there was a home there, just a mound with grass in summer and snow in winter. But this invisibility was protection. The wind did not know which way to enter. The cold did not find many cracks. Even the wolves trod past without lingering. The roof was a quiet guardian. Each layer of the roof was a lesson learned across generations. Grandfathers taught fathers how thick to lay the straw. Mothers taught daughters where to find the softest moss. Knowledge came from touching, from doing, from listening to the house during storms. Sometimes, in midsummer, when the world outside was warm and green, the peasants would climb up and tend the roof, pull up weeds, replace earth that had slipped, press straw back into place with bare feet. All was done slowly, with songs or murmured stories. It was another step in the cycle. Care in the sunlight to prepare for winter's breath. Even during snowfall, the layered roof played its role. Snow was not an enemy. Snow was a blanket. Its weight gently pressed down on the earth layer, sealing it tighter. Its chill never reached the moss below. It lay there, soft and white, growing deeper with each silent night. A sleeping rooftop, dreaming under the same sky as those who lived beneath it. Inside, those who slept under that snow felt safe. When they heard the soft sound of flakes landing, they smiled. They knew the roof was working. They knew their ancestors had built wisely. And in the morning, when the world had become white and perfect, they stepped out of their homes to see the gentle rise of snow against the roof. Seamless, smooth, without worry. Sometimes in midwinter, the weight of snow was too great and a small section of roof would sink. But neighbors came, laughter came, an armful of straw, a helping hand. Before nightfall, the roof was whole again. It was a shared shelter, a shared peace. So the layers held: bark, straw, earth, 3 notes in a chord, 3 threads in a song. A structure made not of walls only, but of relations, between people and land, cold and warmth, earth and sky, a roof that lived. And when spring returned, the roof breathed differently. It let go of the snow, it opened itself to the sun, it sprouted green, alive again. In the end, to sleep under such a roof was to rest softly in the palm of the earth, to let winter whisper above and never feel afraid, to wake to the hush, warm under blankets, knowing the layered love of wood and moss and grass was holding the world outside where it belonged. A quiet shelter, a humble roof, a warm dream beneath the cold sky. Soft spaces of light and shelter, the doors and windows of winter homes. The medieval winter was a slow and steady breath of ice and quiet. Snow fell with gentle insistence. Winds curved gracefully around hills, brushing against wooden walls like wandering fingers. In this hushed world, the peasants' homes stood as havens of warmth and stillness, built not for beauty or grandeur, but for peace, for safety. And within those homes, doors and windows played a quiet, powerful role. They were not mere openings. They were guardians of warmth and watchers of light. Their design was a language spoken by the wise hands of generations, written without ink, and understood by all who lived through winter. Each door was built not as a simple barrier, but as a layered embrace. The first layer was a sturdy wooden door, thick and solid. It was hewn from seasoned timber, worn smooth by hands and time. But this was only the beginning. Set behind it, usually just an arm's length into the house, was another door. Lighter, perhaps not as thick, but no less important. Together, these two doors formed a small chamber, a gentle threshold between outside and in, a buffer against the cold, a pause before warmth. When the outer door opened, winter air drifted into that small space, but it traveled no further. The inner door stayed closed, breathing warmth outward, holding the cold at bay. As the outer door shut again, the brief bite of winter air softened, and the inner door opened only when the space was clear and calm once more. This small ritual, repeated daily, was like a dance between seasons, controlled, measured, gentle. The threshold itself was raised, not flat to the ground, but standing taller like a small hill for feet to step over. This was not an accident. Cold air moves low. It rolls like fog along the earth, settling inches above the ground. By lifting the bottom of the door, the peasants kept that cold flow from slipping under their walls. It was a simple idea, sung softly into form by the long memory of winter. And still the cold sought other paths. That is why doors were made of planks, pressed tightly together, filled with insulating fibers. Wool or flax stuffed into cracks, dried moss layered near the hinges. The door was always heavy, slow to swing, creaking like an old tree. But every sound was reassuring. Every motion promised that warmth remained within. Windows, too, were carefully crafted. Unlike the open-glassed windows of later homes, medieval peasants used much smaller ones, tiny openings in wooden walls, no more than a handspan wide. Their small size was not only because glass was rare and expensive, but because warmth was fragile. Larger openings risked losing heat too quickly, so windows were built narrow, almost shy, facing where the sun would gently find them in daytime. They faced south, always south. In winter, especially in northern Europe, the sun rode low across the sky. Its warmth was weak, its presence brief, but a southern window welcomed every drop of warm light. Such windows glowed during the day, with a soft and steady brightness, not sharp, not glaring, just enough. Instead of glass, the openings were covered with things that could let light through but keep the cold away. Thin pieces of animal bladder stretched taut over wooden frames, translucent parchment made from treated animal skins, softened to cloudy sheets. Even hardened resin, scraped thin from pines, could be pressed over small openings. All these let in a quiet light, golden and calm, like morning fog catching the sun. Inside, the light was never harsh, always gentle. Shadows formed softly along the earthen floor. Smoke from the hearth danced upward without being disturbed by wind. Children played with quiet voices. The house seemed to breathe warmth. The windows could be opened when the weather was kind. Perhaps on rare winter afternoons softened by sun, or during the hopeful days of spring. But the openings were kept small, hinged by simple pins or leather straps, covered again as soon as the chill returned. Even the sound of the wood closing felt like someone pulling a thick blanket close. Sometimes a window had a small shutter on the inside and another on the outside. Both could be latched. At night, both were shut, forming 3 layers: wood, skin, or resin. Wood again. In storms, people sealed the edges with clay to keep the wind from whistling. Nothing was hurried. Everything had its place. Light was not just physical. It had mood. When you enter such a house, especially in winter, there is an immediate stillness. The air feels wrapped. The glow from the windows is low, golden, like the last flicker of a candle. The room seems smaller, safer. You feel calm, as if the house itself is humming a lullaby, and you are inside its song. In larger homes, there might be 2 or 3 windows, one near the hearth, letting smoke rise more evenly, one near the sleeping loft, where the morning sun touched faces gently before the day began. But in most peasant homes, there was just one, a single eye looking outward, a single soft ray pushing inward, enough to see, enough to feel day becoming night. At evening, when flames melted into embers, a family might sit close to the window, gazing outward. They could see snow glowing under moonlight or the blue dusk settling over the fields. The window was a soft boundary between worlds, safe inside, vast, silent world outside. During the coldest spells, windows were packed with wool or straw. Light was sacrificed for warmth. Weeks could pass in muted dusk, but the people understood. The house was sleeping just like the land. And when the window opened again, even just a crack, the first beam of sunlight felt like a song rising. In time, each door, each window carried marks, scratches from years of opening, soft edges smoothed by hands, a latch worn by countless clicks. These details whispered stories. How many winters had passed? How many voices had spoken across these thresholds? The answer was always felt, not spoken. The design was simple, but in that simplicity there was ancient art, a way to honor the wind, the cold, the sunlight, and the fire within. Door and window working quietly, preserving warmth, letting in only what nourished the heart. And in the deep of night, when everything settled, and only the chimney breathed smoke into the starry air, doors and windows closed tightly. The home glowed like a warm ember under snow. Beneath the earth, a quiet warmth in winter. whispering silence of medieval winter when snow lay thick upon the world and frost painted silver upon every branch, there were houses that did not rise tall above the land, but instead nestled gently beneath it. Some homes, made by peasants, who had learned to read the earth like a soft book, were built not upon the surface but partly under it. These were the dugout homes, or semi-underground houses, places of hidden comfort where winter's voice faded softly, lost in layers of soil and stillness. Imagine walking through a medieval countryside in winter. The air is thin and soft. Snow clings to the grasses, quieting even the faintest step. Suddenly, you notice a low shape in the ground, perhaps a gentle mound topped with a slight layer of green or white. This is not just a hill. It is a home, a warm pocket of life, sheltered from the biting winds above. These homes began as simple excavations, a space dug into the earth deep enough to be sheltered from the cold winter wind, but not so deep that it flooded with spring rain. Usually 1 to 2 meters down, just enough to feel surrounded by steady warmth. The soil was firm, packed with years of grass roots and small stones. It held heat. To enter one of these homes, you would likely step down a small slope or earth-packed stairs. The doorway might be set just above ground level, placed to the south to welcome sunlight. Inside, the floor was made of earth, sometimes covered in straw, sometimes packed firm and smooth. The walls were the earth itself, cool to the touch but never truly cold, smooth where hands had pressed them, quiet, strong. Earth beneath the surface holds a steady temperature, always around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Even in freezing weather, even while storms howled above, the ground does not rush, the ground does not change with each gust of wind. It holds. It remembers warmer days and keeps a gentle warmth deep within. And the peasants understood this, not in scientific words, but in the soft language of tradition. Above the dugout room, a roof was built, logs laid across the opening forming a sturdy cover. Over these, moss or woven straw, and then earth again, thick, packed, layer upon layer, like a blanket woven from both land and hand. And because the earth rested on the roof too, grasses would grow, a living roof. In summer, it shone green and soft. In winter, it wore snow like a skin, an invisible home. Inside the home felt like a nest. The sound of wind was distant, rain only murmured. Snow fell without tapping on windows or roaring at the hearth. The temperature never dropped to the freezing point. Fire was used, yes, but smaller fires than in houses above ground. They burned gently with less wood, needed to fill the space with comfort. Sometimes a chimney was built through the roof, a thin line of smoke rising faintly into the cold sky. But for many dugout homes, smoke would drift slowly up through small openings or vents. The air never grew harsh or biting indoors. The space was intimate, a single room perhaps, with a low ceiling held by timber beams, a bed of straw, a pot hung over embers, a small chest or table carved by hand. The warmth was not just physical. There was a calmness here, in the knowing that earth itself cradled you. No tall walls to tremble in storms, no steep roofs to catch the wind, just you in a soft envelope of soil and wood. It was not grand, but it was safe. From the outside, these homes seemed to blend with the land. From a distance, it was as if the hill itself held a secret. Sometimes, during heavy snow, the home was entirely hidden in white silence. Only the slight shape of a roof and the smoke whispering out marked its presence. as though winter had hushed its existence but allowed it warmth. The peasants who lived in these dwellings understood the gentle logic of the earth. They knew how to pack soil against wood to keep moisture away. They layered old wool or straw along the ground to soften the floor. In harsher climates, the walls might be reinforced with logs or woven branches, then covered again with packed clay. The home was always close to the land, always one with it. Children, too, loved these homes. They felt like hidden caves, places where stories could be told and games could be played without worry of the wind snatching away their words. In the evenings, families gathered near the hearth, shadows dancing softly above them. The heat from the fire rose, stayed, lingered. When the cold outside grew stronger, the house only became more stable. The deeper the frost, the more the outside world froze, the more the steady heart of the earth warmed the inside. In a surface home with walls of wood, the chill would seep in through cracks and joints. Not here. The earth walls did not let the cold rush through. The temperature was quiet, slow, constant. Above ground, the winds could be ruthless, icy, relentless, desperate in their push through frozen branches and cracks in old timber. But below ground, in dim light, the winds were just sounds heard from afar. A distant voice never given permission to enter. Season after season, these homes stood, sometimes for families, sometimes for livestock in harsh weather, sometimes used as storage for food that needed cool temperatures in summer. Versatile, steady, eternal in their patient shape. It was said that in the deepest winters, when wolves ran silently across frozen fields and frost clung to the edges of every home, the dugout houses remained the warmest. Less wood burned, less effort needed, just listening, just breathing inside a womb of earth. When spring finally softened the world, green rising, birds singing again, the people would step up into the open with smiles. They had lived well. No walls cracked, no roof torn by blizzards. Just another winter wrapped in the earth's gentle care. Perhaps in the quietest hours of night, lying under wool blankets, the earth whispered to them, the same way a mother might sing to a child, a lullaby of steady warmth, of roots and soil, of enduring stillness. This was not a grand castle, not a church with flying buttresses. It was a simple shelter, partly hidden, fully alive, a structure that held the warmth of the past, the breath of the present, and the promise of quiet nights in times yet to come. And through all of it, the people slept, warm, safe, surrounded by earth and love. The gentle thread of community, a winter weaving of care. Winter in a medieval village was not just a season of cold and survival. It was a shared breath, a soft, slow sigh across hills and fields, pressing people closer together. The snow fell evenly across every roof. The wind whirled around every home. And the warmth that people felt inside was not just from firewood or thick walls. It was from each other. It was from the quiet, enduring bond of community. In those small villages where the houses sat near one another like old friends, leaning in against the wind, every person knew that winter was not meant to be endured alone. People didn't write this rule. They didn't speak of it in loud halls or in formal words. They simply lived it like breathing. When cold winds arrived, they did not shut their doors and turn inward only. They also reached out with silent understanding, to their neighbors. You might have seen it if you'd walked through such a village. A man with strong shoulders carrying a bundle of wood across a snowy path, not to his own door, but to another house whose chimney had been quiet too long. No words needed, just a nod, a look, one kind hand placing wood beside another's door, or perhaps an elderly woman, small and slow, boiling a pot of barley porridge and carrying it across frosty ground to a family whose mother was ill. The porridge steam rose into the winter air. It was more than food. It was warmth carried by footsteps, a gesture gentle as snow landing. In return, someone else mended her thatched roof when storm winds blew wild. They did not speak in grand terms of kindness. They simply helped because that was what one did. In the deep rhythm of winter, kindness was not loud or glorious. It was everyday, soft, essential. Repairing houses was a shared ritual. If the frost damaged a roof beam or the creeping cold cracked a wall, several villagers would appear the next day, tools in hands, simple tools, wooden mallets, handmade chisels, woven ropes. They would work together in quiet, hammering slow, measured taps. No one rushed. The winter was too long to need rushing. Every movement counted. Every wall mattered. Helping was not charity. It was survival. But it was also something deeper, woven through the days, like a sunrise across fresh snow. Children learned this way of living not through lectures, but by watching. They saw fires being shared. They saw men and women exchanging bundles of herbs or dry kindling under the winter sun. They watched their parents press moss into cracks of their neighbor's home, watched their elders wrap wool around a stranger's cold hands. They absorbed every action into their own quiet understanding. Care was passed on like bread passed across a table. And so knowledge traveled too. How to build a weather-tight wall, how to seal smoke holes, where to gather the best pine resin, how to dry mushrooms before frost turned them bitter. Nobody held these truths tightly or guarded them for personal pride. They gave them like one gives a good story, freely, kindly to those who needed it, especially in winter, when every lesson was a warm stone in one's hand. You might have seen two men leaning over a broken tool, one teaching the other how to fix it, the breath from their words turning to mist, the silence between sentences long and unhurried, a shared moment, quiet and equal, not instructor and student, just two humans surviving together by sharing what they knew. Inside homes, families were not alone. If one child fell ill, 2 or 3 women might come with cloths soaked in warm water, with herbs stirred into broth. If a pregnant woman struggled through winter's harsh hours, others sat with her, murmuring stories, holding her hand, bringing comfort in ways that did not need naming. Kindness felt like another blanket layered around everyone. Sometimes, in the middle of the coldest nights, a knock would sound on one door. A gentle knock, not a cry for help, just someone seeking a moment's warmth, with no shame, no fear. Inside, a bed space would open, a cup would be filled, a hand would quietly guide them in. "Sleep here," they might whisper. "The storm is too much tonight." No one asked why. No one kept count of who gave more or who needed more. It was not a ledger to balance. The balance already existed in the shared knowing that winter demanded unity. Every meal, every mended roof, every wiped tear, Every shared breath drew lines between people, lines made not of obligation but of gentle memory. When a neighbor helped repair your chimney, you remembered. Not with words, not with vows, but in the natural way you'd ladle an extra scoop of stew into their bowl when times later brought abundance. Peace flowed like this: silent, mutual, dependable. And even when spring returned, when the frost melted and the earth breathed again in green, and people spent more time in fields or under open skies, this winter rhythm remained woven into their bones. They knew they had passed winter together, by shared hearths, shared burdens, one long, quiet lullaby of care. Sometimes, in a home warmed with shared wood and shared laughter, someone would sit near the hearth in late evening and reflect. My roof stands because someone held it with me. My fire burns because someone chopped wood beside me. My hunger is eased because someone thought of me. And then their heart would soften with gratitude, deep, quiet gratitude, and they would vow silently, I will do the same. Because in the end, the true architecture of medieval winter was not only stone or straw or moss stuffed between logs, it was human hearts placed beside one another in a slow, enduring shelter that no storm could take away. Some say that winter is the hardest season, but to them it was also the most human, a season where the world is quieter, and so the whisper of kindness is louder. A time when walls of homes might shake with ice and wind, but walls of connection hold steady, where the sharpness of cold gathers everyone into one soft body of warmth. A season when survival is not just an act of resourcefulness, but an act of togetherness, spreading warmth across a silent, snowy land, like the gentle glow of a hearth seen through a frosted window. A quiet winter night. There is a winter night in the medieval countryside, and it settles like a thick wool blanket upon all things. The trees, bare and silent, stand like watchers in the cold. The fields lie resting, blanketed in white. The world is slow and hush-toned, as if every breath of wind moves at half its usual pace. In this quiet world, a small wooden house sits, tucked beneath a snow-soft roof, glowing like an ember in a sea of frost. Inside the house, night has come gently. The walls are thick logs, sealed with moss and clay. The roof above is layered with straw and living earth, now covered in snow that rests like a dream. The fire in the hearth burns low but steady. It does not roar. It murmurs, crackling gently, sending up ribbons of smoke that spiral through the chimney, disappearing into the winter sky. This is the heart of the home tonight, the steady, glowing fire. Around it, the room is dark, but not in a frightening way. A warm kind of darkness, soft around the edges where the firelight fades into shadow. If you listen, you can hear the wood whisper as it burns, tiny pops and sighs, as if the wood is telling stories of old forests, now transformed into warmth. Outside, the wind travels across snow-covered ground. It speaks in long, rising sighs, sometimes fading, sometimes circling. But inside the house, the sound is distant, softened by walls that know how to hold the quiet. Families sleep here after long days of simple, steady work. There are no late-night distractions, no lamps burning past bedtime, no artificial sounds, just the hush of night and the gentle glow of embers They lie on raised wooden platforms covered with bundles of wool, hay, linen, whatever they've woven or saved through seasons, all resting close to one another for warmth and for comfort. There are no separate rooms, no hallways, just one long space shared by all. Parents, children, maybe even a grandparent, sleeping under the same woven roof. Some spaces hold tools, others jars of dried herbs or grains, everything in its place resting too. As they sleep, the gnarled wood overhead creaks ever so softly. The house seems to breathe with them, its structure expanding slightly in rising warmth, settling again as embers die lower. A home made of earth and hand, of effort and patience. Tonight, like many medieval winter nights, has passed without disturbance. There were no predators at the door, no sickness sweeping through the rooms, no storms shaking the walls, just gentle winter. Even the animals rest. Outside, a soft sigh drifts from the barn. A cow shifting in hay, a horse stamping sleepily in its stall. Chickens roost close together for warmth, their feathers puffed, their eyes closed, all breathing in time with the rhythm of night. Sometimes a dog might stir, lift its head from a curled sleep, listen for a moment, then soften again and return to slumber. Time tonight flows differently. Each hour slips gently into the next, unnoticed. Each minute breathes like a distant wave pulling quietly against the shore. Without clocks, without light, the night seems longer, but also kinder. Time rests, and the people rest with it. The darkness inside the house is alive with comfort. A living, breathing silence. It cradles dreams. Little ones might dream of spring meadows, of lambs and flowers. Adults might dream of sowing seeds in warm soil, or simply sleep without images, letting the mind drift like snowflakes, falling lightly from sky to earth. And in this slow breath of night, the cold doesn't conquer. The small fire burns enough heat to keep frost at bay. The bodies huddled together share warmth. Hands lie close, shoulders touch, and in that nearness is a quiet knowledge. We live better together than apart. There is no thinking of hardship in this hour, no worry about next season's crop yield, no thoughts of taxes or travel. Night has taken those things away with the sunlight. Night has made space for nothing but breath and rest. Even when the fire grows low and the embers turn rosy and dark, the warmth lingers long. Smoke still rises. A few glowing coals still pulse softly under blackened wood. It is enough. The mother wakes once in a while, listens for the children, hears them breathing soundly, smiles without opening her eyes. In her mind, the slow music of wind and fire weave together like threads. Then she, too, returns to sleep. Outside, the moon might be shining, mirrored in snow, or hidden behind thick clouds. It doesn't matter. The night is full, content, whole. The sky feels infinite, the ground feels deep. And when morning comes, it will not arrive suddenly. Light will seep slowly through the thin animal skin window covering. A pale blue glow, soft and cool, before becoming gold. Frost patterns will decorate the edges of the house. The fire in the hearth will have collapsed into powdery ash. A new fire must be built. But there is no rush in waking. One by one, eyes open, a hand reaches out to stir embers. A few thin sticks, placed with care. Breath blown, sparks rising once again. Light and warmth return, and voices begin, soft, groggy voices. Someone stretches. A child laughs. Someone shivers and draws their blanket closer before pushing it aside for good. The dog shakes off sleep with soft jingle of collar and sits beside the fire, tail relaxed. The night has passed, quietly, like a dream. A night with no triumph and no tragedy, just existence, just acceptance of a still, cold world and a warm life inside it. Days will come, snow will melt, grass will rise, earth will soften, spring will bloom across the land. But tonight, or rather last night, was a gift. A slow breath of living in winter's arms. A reminder that every moment does not need grandeur to be meaningful. That sometimes the deepest comfort comes not from action, but from stillness, from being together in warmth. A gentle winter's rest. Life in medieval snow. Winter in the medieval countryside was quiet, soft, and slow. The world was wrapped in layers of snow like thick white wool, and time seemed to walk gently as if afraid to disturb the stillness. The villagers understood this rhythm. They moved with it, breathed with it, rested with it. Life in winter was not about rushing. It was about staying warm. It was about staying together. Houses were built low and simple, thick wooden beams sealed with moss, packed earth floors, small windows that faced south to catch whatever sun might pass their way. A fire burned in the hearth, glowing like a quiet heart of light. It was not blazing. It didn't need to be. Just a slow, steady warmth, enough to keep the air gentle and give comfort to everyone inside. Nights were long and soft. The family slept close on raised wooden platforms, covered in wool blankets or straw mats. They breathed quietly, listening to the whisper of wind outside, sometimes a soft creak of wood, sometimes the sound of snow slipping from the roof. All was peaceful. The world beyond the walls seemed far away. Meals were humble, warm, and steady. Porridge, stewed cabbage, roasted root vegetables stored from the harvest. They ate slowly, savored every warmth in every bite. The meal wasn't an occasion, it was a pause, a moment to feel fire in the stomach, when everything else outside was frost and night. Sometimes the family would sit together near the fire, speaking little, sharing presents more than words. A mother would mend clothes. A father might carve wood. Children might draw patterns in the dust. There was no need for many words. Just being together was enough. If you listened closely in such a night, you might hear the quiet breathing of the house itself, logs shifting with the warmth, the slow sigh of embers, a space made for rest, made for calm. Every day was gentle work, gathering more firewood, checking the thatch, feeding the animals. They did not hurry. Winter was slow. They met it on its terms, walking through snow in pairs or small groups, helping each other cut wood, carry water, fix whatever needed fixing. They supported one another not with loud promises, but with practiced hands and warm smiles in the frost. Children played in snowdrifts by day and curled beneath blankets by night, their cheeks pink and bright from the cold and laughter. They grew up not thinking winter was harsh, but simply different, another season with another pace. When snow piled high on roofs and no one could travel far, they found joy in stillness. They sang softly, told quiet stories passed down through generations, shared memories of family and harvest and stars. Winter gave them time to look inward, to gather strength, to simply exist without the pull of the outside world. Sometimes they would wake early while everything was dim and blue with morning ice and see frost patterns on the inside of the windows, like flowers, like feathered wings. They admired them in silence, knowing they would melt by midday, only to return again in the next night's chill. A small, fleeting gift of winter art. And then, one day, slowly, gently, winter began to loosen its hold. Snow softened, sunlight lingered longer, the earth began to breathe again, but no one rushed its ending. They welcomed each breeze, each thaw with gratitude. All things move in their own time. Tonight, just like then, may your sleep be as gentle as theirs. May you feel warmth even in the coldest hours. May your breath be steady. May your dreams be soft. Good night and sleep deeply in peace and in warmth.